You see an accomplished acquaintance announce a spectacular failure, and you feel a brief, uncomfortable flicker of satisfaction. This internal reaction is rarely admitted to, but it's a biological reality that saturates our daily social judgments. Based on a 2009 fMRI study by Hidehiko Takahashi, when participants watched an envied person fail, their reward centers, specifically the ventral striatum and orbitofrontal cortex, lit up significantly. The brain floods with dopamine, treating a rival's misfortune like a personal victory. This 2x2 matrix separates Schadenfreude, literally damaged joy, from sadism. Sadism requires active agency to inflict suffering. Schadenfreude sits on the passive side. The misfortune happens independently of the observer, by accident or the target's own doing. This neural evidence suggests that our brain's reward system responds automatically to social information, categorizing a rival's failure as a positive outcome for the observer. In human ancestral environments, resources like food, status, and mating opportunities were strictly finite. It was a zero-sum reality. Another person's loss directly translated to an increase in your own relative status and survival odds. In Festinger's social comparison theory, when observed node B moves upward, observer node A experiences a deficit. Smith and Kim identified the engine, malicious envy. When the superior target stumbles, the upward comparison gap is erased, triggering mathematical relief and a dopamine flash. Your brain rewards you because relative parity is restored. It achieves this with zero actual effort or self-improvement on your part. You might assume that highly competitive, confident people experience the most Schadenfreude. The data shows the exact opposite. The emotion acts as a shield for fragile egos. A 2011 study mapped this. Researchers deliberately gave subjects negative feedback to artificially threaten their baseline self-esteem. When these self-threatened subjects later watched a successful peer fail, their joy spiked disproportionately compared to the control group. This sequence operates as a psychological immune response. Watching the high flyer crash provides immediate proxy pain relief from the observer's own feelings of incompetence. A chronic reliance on Schadenfreude points away from malice. It indicates deep-seated personal insecurity and vulnerability. Experiencing pleasure at another person's pain creates cognitive dissonance. To avoid guilt, the conscious mind requires a moral permission slip. We use Norman Feather's just world hypothesis as a gatekeeper filter. If we can reframe a failure as cosmic justice for arrogance or unearned privilege, we bypass our internal guilt. The pleasure signals that the system works. This exact same dynamic expands into intergroup relations. Data from Leach and Spears shows that individuals weaponize the failure of a rival outgroup to artificially boost their own collective in-group status. Whether it is rival sports teams or opposing political factions, a shared laugh at an outgroup's expense reinforces a stark tribal boundary. At its extreme, tribalism strips the target of their individual humanity. When outgroups are dehumanized, their severe suffering evokes no empathetic distress. It leaves only unadulterated glee. By justifying our joy through systemic fairness or tribal loyalty, we sanitize our raw envy. We allow ourselves to feel righteous instead of petty. We have to map how this dopamine reward model applies to psychological outliers, specifically individuals who measure high in dark triad traits. Narcissists process the failure of others strictly as validating evidence of their own grandiosity. A rival's downfall proves their own perceived exceptionalism. Machiavellians derive cynical, pragmatic joy from failures. They view a stumble as an exploitable opportunity, confirming their belief that the public is weak and gullible. Psychopaths experience a raw, unfiltered version of this pleasure. As this triad of charts highlights, they lack the empathic distress inhibition that usually acts as a brake on enjoyment due to a severe structural deficit in trait empathy. While these traits amplify the phenomenon, the vast majority of everyday Schadenfreude is rooted in standard ego vulnerabilities, not clinical dark pathology. In moderate, context-appropriate doses, Schadenfreude is highly adaptive. It functions as an emotional regulator, resetting the balance against the psychological exhaustion of chronic upward social comparison. It serves a secondary social function. Collective amusement acts as a non-violent sanction that subtly polices arrogant behavior and enforces group humility. The danger arises when the threshold for deservingness drops too low, and proxy joy permanently replaces genuine achievement. The manual neurobiological antidote to this loop is active empathy. As the 3D fMRI model returns, we see how deliberately imagining the target's subjective experience of loss initiates a cognitive override. A cooling blue pulse from the prefrontal cortex dampens the striatal reward activation. Taking a few seconds for perspective taking dissipates the tension of envy, returning your emotional state to a quiet equilibrium. Maturation requires mindful interrogation. It involves examining our narratives of who deserves to fail and consciously shifting malicious envy into benign envy, where we use a rival's success as a constructive roadmap rather than wishing for their downfall. Those brief smiles reveal where we feel most insecure. Recognizing the impulse allows us to focus on building our own stability rather than relying on the collapse of someone else's ruins.